Talk about investing in this. Obviously, you built Courtside over the last decade into something that is extremely well known in the space. I'd love maybe a quick flyby of the Courtside journey to this point, and then where you see some of the biggest opportunities looking forward in terms of like financing the next generation of collectibles.
Yeah, Courtside's exactly 10 years old now. We started in 2016. I was a founder before this, running a sports analytics software company. I built that business over 8 years, sold it in 2017. And about a year before we exited the business was when we launched Courtside, primarily because we saw a complete lack of capital flowing into this area. And not collectibles in particular, but sports and entertainment more broadly was where our thesis was. We felt like everybody in the world on a daily basis, no matter how rich or how poor, needs some form of entertainment. And in many cases, that entertainment needs to be cheap. So watching sports doesn't cost too much money. I mean, depending on how many bundles you have to buy these days. But for the most part, watching sports is one of the cheapest forms of entertainment. Mobile gaming is another really cheap form of entertainment. Collectibles, on the other hand, is probably one of the more expensive forms of entertainment that's out there, right? So looking at all sides of the spectrum. But when we started, it was really a sports-focused fund first and foremost.
And before you move on, like, why was that weird at the time? Because you're describing this to me, and I'm like, yeah, obviously, sports and entertainment, it's a universal need. Why was that different, and why were less people focused on that in 2016?
I think the way generalist VCs thought about sports was that, well, sports was things that you sold to teams and athletes, and they don't like to spend a lot of money there. And they're not wrong. Like, in the history of the world, there's maybe $1 billion company that's been built selling product to teams, right? And so, again, when you think about venture returns and the step function you need there to get to, where you need to generate returns, it's rare that you're going to get those types of returns from a pure play sports company. So I think sports had just gotten a bad name and a bad rep as a result of that. It's not like there's anything wrong with sports. It's not a venture returnable game. So let maybe the late stage private equity guys play there where they need a 3x return. Or it's a sort of lifestyle business for founders. It's not venture backable. And we came in with a much broader view of the market and said, look, sports isn't just stuff that you sell to teams and athletes. It's a world of fantasy and sports betting. It's all live events. It's mobile gaming. It's collectibles. It's fitness and wellness and longevity and health. And like when we looked at sports through that lens, it became clear to us that there had already been many billion-dollar companies built, and there would be many more in the future. But no one had decided to build an institutional fund focused on it, and we were the first ones to do it in 2016. So when we got started, we were the first money in a company called The Athletic, which was a subscription news site for sports. Back then, no one said anyone would pay for written content in sports. They said there's too much free content out there, no one will do it. And yet these guys in 5 years built a company that got bought for a little over $500 million by the New York Times. We were also lucky enough to be the first money in StockX, which was sort of where our collectibles thesis grew from, because we saw eBay for the first 20 years had been sort of the catch-all marketplace on the internet. But as these items were becoming more and more valuable, eBay was no longer the right place because it was filled with fraudulent items. It's just not a great overall experience from a UI UX perspective. And even as a seller, like if a consumer complains about anything, they basically just side with the consumer and it's game over, and you as a seller are shit out of luck. And so we said, you know what, this doesn't make any sense. Vertically focused marketplaces are where things are going to go as the items become more and more expensive. And so StockX was the first one to do that for sneakers. And, they went from 20 million in their first round of funding to 7 billion in 5 years' time. It was an unbelievable story. And so from there, we've then, attempted to do the StockX for multiple other categories. So we've done something in sort of Pokemon cards and that whole Magic the Gathering category. We've done something in art. We've done something in watches, a company called Bezel. And then now I think where the world is going is more sort of the gamification of collectibles, where the idea of ripping open a pack, well, that's what you would do in person. You would go to Target, buy a pack of cards and rip it open. Well, that's a lot of friction for people. So how can you just do that on the internet? And so you have businesses like Whatnot. We just backed a company that is similar in Latin America called Onda, that's going after the LATAM market for breakers to be able to build businesses opening packs online. And then you've got sort of the next version of that, which is repacking. So this is digital pack opening. So you've got a vault sitting with tens of thousands of graded cards, and there's an algorithm. And so you come in and you put $20 into the vending machine on the app, and the system is going to pick one of those 1,000 cards that are in that vault, and that's what you've just got. Now that card could be worth $2. It could be worth $2,000. There's an odds distribution that is shown to you. And as soon as you get your card, you can do one of three things. You can either say, well, send me that card, and they will ship you the card. You could say, well, just store the card for me. I don't know what I want to do with it yet. They will just continue vaulting the card, but it's under your account. Or three, the system will buy that card back from you for, call it 80% of what the fair market value is right now. So you can sell it back to the system, and then you can play the game again and rip open another pack, right? And there are now multiple businesses. We've backed one, and there's other businesses out there, all that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue of people just trying to open up and win a card that they want to keep. So we've gone from sort of the analog, let me go to a flea market and find something, to 24/7, 365. I can click a button on my browser and try to find a super cool collectible.
Which is like that experience you just described is the hunt, so to speak.
That's the hunt.
It's the piece that is 99% of the reward, as you described earlier.
From the comfort of your couch, not having to get up, not having to go out in the sun and rummage through a flea market to find something.
A quick note before we continue the conversation. Alongside the Diligent Observer podcast and newsletter, I also run an outsourced operations service specifically built to serve angel networks. My team handles things like initial screening, social media, newsletter prep, platform management, and a whole lot more. The kinds of things that either aren't getting done or shouldn't be done by busy community leaders. If that sounds interesting to you, send me a note. Now, back to it. Oh, it's crazy. So as I think forward, then the future here is continuing to reduce the friction to access this experience from a human standpoint.
Yes, and I think the ecosystem to support all of this. So as items have gotten more and more expensive and now riskier to own, insurance becomes important, right? So in a company called Wax Insurance, which is sort of the market leader in luxury insurance now in the US, whether it started with watches, but they do watches, handbags, sneakers, art, everything, whole nine yards. If you even want to do your home and auto, you could, but their specialty is collectibles. Financing. So art financing has been done for decades by the big private wealth firms. So if you're a client at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and you've got, several hundred million or $1 billion of assets with them, and you've got, say, $1 billion of blue chip art, they've historically been happy to lend you 30, 40, 50% even against the value of your art at very low rates. Like you're talking 3%, 4% money. Now, there's very few people who qualify to be private wealth at Goldman with $1 billion of art. But I say, why is it that somebody with a $10 million watch collection or a $5 billion one-of-one trading card collection should not be able to access the same kind of leverage? It makes complete. If you're willing to lend against my home, you should be willing to lend against my watches. My watches are way more liquid than my home is. You have to go through a hell of a problem to come and foreclose on my home and go and sell that. You take my watch and sell them tomorrow and you'll have all your money back, right? But why isn't anyone doing this? It's because the big banks are always concerned about not understanding the asset and the volatility. But if you're doing it for art, all of these other collectible categories are soon behind. And so, I've been working with some banks over the past year to get them comfortable with the idea of lending against other collectible assets beyond art. And so I think that that's going to be a big opportunity here in the next few years to unlock. Shipping and logistics, another problem. Like when you're shipping fragile items, things that need insurance, things that need to be packed in a certain way, it's not as easy. When you sell a watch, you can't just walk down to FedEx, pop it into a box and ship it to somebody, because FedEx only insures your stuff for $100. You can't even buy additional insurance at FedEx. So you got to need a whole separate company that you have to go through to ship something fully insured. So there's all of this stuff that is the ecosystem in and around the commerce aspect of collectibles that I believe will continue to be large businesses. And so spending a lot of time on them as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew, and if you're an angel investor looking for essential angel intel in 5 minutes every week, I think you'd enjoy my newsletter. I send my best stuff, interesting deals, and more straight to your inbox so you never miss a thing. Subscribe today at thediligentobserver.com.